İşte Başbakanımız Binali Yildirim.
Turkey's constitutional referendum ended with the decision to switch to a presidential system. The government had stressed this change would spur the economy, and Prime Minister Binali Yildirim says his cabinet will stick to the time-tested formula of building infrastructure to create jobs and boost demand.
This is why Turkey's economy tripled in size and exports quadrupled. While the world was running from crisis to crisis, Turkey carried out some of the largest projects in the world.
Over the next 10 years, the government will spend $28 billion on the country's rail network. Tens of billions of dollars will also be spent on health, education, and on rebuilding structures that are at risk from earthquakes. And the government plans to pay for all this through public-private partnerships and a newly launched sovereign wealth fund. That should help it strike a balance between higher spending and limiting government debt. And it's taking steps to ease the burden of loans and taxes so people can spend more and drive demand for Turkey's businesses.
We are going to help citizens who had difficulties paying their dues by offering them new payment plans.
A failed coup attempt, regional instability, and political changes made 2016 a sluggish year for Turkey's economy. And rising tensions with the European Union could dampen prospects of more economic cooperation in the future. That leaves a lot of hope riding on the government's plan to boost the domestic economy. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
And joining me now is Hatice Karahan. She's an economist at the SETA Foundation for Political, Economic and Social Research here in Istanbul. Hatice, thank you very much for joining us once again on Money Talks. Now, at the end of Mobin's report there, we heard a little bit about what's happening in Europe with regards to Turkey. We'll come back to that in a minute. But first, I want to start with asking you about the complicated balancing act that the government has right now. I mean, on the one hand, they want to boost growth, but on the other hand, they need to keep spending in check and they need to keep inflation in check. How are they going to achieve this balancing act?
You know, after a long story of growth, the Turkish economy contracted suddenly in the third quarter of 2016, and this was mainly due to the ramifications of the coup attempt. And in that period, the domestic demand declined significantly, and of course, this was due to the uncertainties emerged. But in the last quarter, we experienced a quick recovery, which was the good news. And we left 2016 behind with a 2.9% of growth. This does not sound too bad for a year when you had all kinds of domestic and global troubles. But still, we admit that the Turkish economy needs a higher growth rate due to the demographics especially. And that's why the government recently offered some stimulus to accelerate the economy by loosening the fiscal policy that you mentioned. And what we have seen so far is that it helps, the support helped the economy get up and keep walking. And the advantage here is that Turkey has maintained its fiscal discipline for a long period of time, and we have a space there to use for such difficult times. But the next step that should be used, and which will be the critical point, is for Turkey to implement the structural reforms. This will really bring the high growth rates. And for the inflation side, it's very important, of course, and I assume that we'll have a tight monetary policy stance in the near future.
Yeah, and it was interesting, I mean, going back to just what you said about the growth, a lot of that growth that you mentioned was actually fueled by consumer spending, if I remember correctly, wasn't it?
Yeah,
so that was an interesting part of that
that's why we need investments. I mean, the consumption is still there, but we need to, accelerate the investments in the economy for sustainable growth. Let's
talk a little bit about Turkey's relationship with Europe. Now, today, a European rights body put Turkey on a monitoring watch list, potentially affecting its accession plans to the European Union. How is all this going to affect the Turkish economy going forwards?
Yeah, Turkey is a member of the Council of Europe, and it's so saddening to hear such news. But this is more of a recommendation, and it has no legal imposition so far. And I think and I believe that this decision will not lead the European Union to stop the accession negotiations. And as for the economy, still this will lead to a deterioration in perception, so it's not good news, of course. But the ongoing tension between the two sides is not good news for anyone. And that's why the tension should be reduced as soon as possible, and we need a constructive approach, and we need help from the EU, of course, in this sense. Because Turkey needs the European Union, and the European Union needs Turkey in many dimensions. That's why a formula should be made, to have sustainable relationships. And that's why I think the revision of the customs union will be an efficient tool to, soften the environment and to have a better outlook for the relationships.
Well, this is a story that we're going to be following quite closely, and we hope you can give us your analysis on this subject again in the near future. But unfortunately, we're out of time for now. Hatice Karahan from the SETA Institute here in Istanbul, thank you very much for joining us.
For having me.